Welcome, everyone. I'm Mike Gibbs, and today we're here to talk about stress management techniques, meditation, and yoga to enhance your performance. I'm very lucky to have Todd Mclaughlin here. He's the founder and CEO of Native Yoga. He's a yoga coach and a meditation coach that I've worked with over 17 years. I've been to over 500 yoga studios, and there's not a studio anywhere in the world that I've liked as much as Todd's. And that's why I have him coming here today with you. So, you know, in our world, in the tech world, or any career for that matter, there's just stress in life. And the reality is, stress is not a problem. It's how we react to the stress that determines whether it's good for us or bad for us. There are some people that you find that can work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're having a ball. And there's other people that after 1 hour work, they're sitting there with a headache on their sofa and they get a headache and can't function. So it's how we manage stress that matters. So today we're going to talk about meditation for burnout and specifically how to either get unburned out or not get burned out in the first place. We're going to talk about some stress management techniques, and there's no one finer that I know on this earth than Todd to really talk about them. We're going to talk about yoga for performance, and believe me, in my 17 years of yoga, I learned a lot about performance. In fact, I was actually sentenced to yoga by a martial arts instructor about 17 years ago. And I took a class in Todd's studio taught by his wonderful wife, Tamara McLaughlin. And I went back to that martial arts class the next day and they were hitting them. And people were like, Mike, did you start using steroids last night? I'm like, no, but my hips move now. And it all came from yoga. So yoga can boost mental performance, physical performance, rehab injuries. And then we're going to get into breathing techniques for anxiety. You know, if you actually look at the prescribed drugs in America, some of the number 1 and 2 drugs are actually prescribed for depression and anxiety, and we can control that within our means. So Todd's going to talk about that. Now, I don't know how many of you work at a desk, but I'm stuck behind a desk a lot of the day. And we're going to talk about office yoga because sitting is not good for you, but you know, we can talk about some chair yoga, we can talk about some gentle chair yoga, and my favorite, of course, is box breathing. And we'll discuss box breathing techniques. I'll tell you why I like box breathing, because it works. But, you know, if I get into a deep, detailed discussion with pranayama breathing techniques with people, they look at me like I have 4 heads. But Navy SEALs are being taught box breathing. Elite CEOs are being taught box breathing. Olympians are being taught box breathing. SWAT team members are being taught box breathing because it works and it's simple. So those are the things we're going to talk about, but this is Todd Mclaughlin. He's been practicing and teaching yoga for as long as I know. I know he studied under Bikram, who, if you're unfamiliar with Bikram yoga, the hot yoga, I know he also studied under Tim Miller, who was one of basically the disciples of Pattabhi Jois, who basically founded Ashtanga yoga. I know Todd's trained in India with the Jois family. So I'll let Todd introduce himself and his studio, Native Yoga, which I totally love, that Native Yoga studio. To me, it's like this old TV show Cheers, where sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name and they're always glad you came. Well, that's Native Yoga for me. So Todd, why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, thank you so much, Mike, and the Go Cloud team for having me on today. I really appreciate that introduction, and I'm so happy to be here. I believe firmly that yoga and meditation is absolutely critical for managing stress and for maintaining overall sense of well-being. And so I'm so happy to have this opportunity to speak and share my love and passion for yoga and meditation. So thank you so much, Mike, for inviting me today.
Wonderful. We're thrilled. And this is going to be a fun conversation, something that I'm very passionate about. My team will be texting me in about 30 seconds if I don't tell you that we have a completely free webinar on Thursday for you to how to get your first cloud architect job, if that's a desire for yours. So please sign up. It's completely free. And not only will teach you everything you need to know and get it, but we're there. My team also wanted to inform me that right now, because it's Christmas and it's New Year's and we want you to start off that year right, we have a 35% discount on everything that we have. My team will pop a link to that in the chat box. So now's a great chance to change your life, change your emotional life, change your physical life, and change your career. And I promise you, make tomorrow a better day than today. So the reason I'm so excited to have Todd here is because stress affects us all. Now, in my youth, before I went into tech, I used to practice internal medicine. I'm a nurse practitioner. And prior to that, I paid my way through school by being a firefighter paramedic. So I got to see the worst of the worst. And I got to see it on a daily basis. And quite frankly, I got to live the worst of the worst. It was just part of my life. And I can tell you how I got through college. I got through college by doing the following. I went to school from basically 7 to 3. From 3:30 to 11, I worked at the Firehouse Rescue Squad. And then from 11 to 7, I still worked at the Firehouse Rescue Squad. And this was Monday through Friday every day. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I worked a double from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. both days. Now, that actually was 114 hours of work, and I went to school full time. I slept at the ambulance squad in between calls. And I went to school with people that didn't have a job, that were failing out of school, and they were struggling. And why were they struggling? And I was having a good time. Not only was I having a good time, I got to meet the girl that I married, and we're still married 28 years later. I had close to a 4.0 GPA, and people knew me forever, and it was because I was a martial artist. And in martial arts, specifically the kind I had studied in my youth, they made us sit in a room, close our eyes, and contemplate and focus on our breathing. Now, I didn't know this was really meditation at the time. I just thought it was martial arts, and I thought we all did it. And then I found yoga. And that literally changed everything. But when I went to school, everybody else is stressed, they're failing, they're dropping out. And 25% of our class actually failed out. And here I'm working 2.5 jobs, and I'm still relaxed because the way I managed it. And I remember when I'd be a firefighter paramedic and people would call 911 on the ambulance, I'd have some tough guy that, literally speaking, had an arm that was partially amputated, and he's holding it on like this and trying to say, I don't need to go to the hospital, I'm fine, just give me a Band-Aid. And then I had somebody else that had what you call a hangnail or a fingernail that was bad. And, we had to give them IV Valium on the way to the hospital because they had a panic attack so bad. I mean, it was incredible. So it's all about how we manage stress, how we process stress, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So we're here because of that. So in your career, here's why you need to know. You have a rough day with a client. If you burst out on the client with an outburst, you lose your job. If you're in that room and you can keep it calm, you can kind of breathe through it, and then you get back and then you build a team and say, I don't even know where to begin. This is terrifying, but I'm going to do it. You're good. You have a discussion with your peers, and all of a sudden it gets hostile. Guess what? Your next promotion is gone. Potentially, you'll be part of the next layoff, and you don't want to be there. By comparison, you're the happy, calm, relaxed person. Magic happens to you in your career. But it's more than that. You go home, you're in your house, and let's face it, life has stress. The next thing you realize, your spouse says something to you, and you're in a bad mood because you had a stressful day, and you lash out about them. Well, I got to tell you, you may be paying for trips to Hawaii and $2,000 shoes and handbags just to make your wife happy. And you don't need to do that if you could just breathe. So that's why we're going to talk about today. So you can stay healthy, so you can enjoy your life, and so you can manage your career. Because what is the biggest predictor of your career success? I can tell you right now, it's your emotional intelligence. Statistics tells us that. And emotional intelligence is about maintaining and managing your emotions as well as managing others' emotions. And there's all this ridiculous emotional intelligence training out there, but it never teaches you how to manage your emotions. It just tells you what to say. And that's all great until you get stressed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about neurology, and then Todd and I are going to have a big discussion. So right now, and this is really important for everybody to understand, we're calm, we're working with what's called the prefrontal cortex, our brain. The prefrontal cortex is the thinking, the logical reasoning part of our brain. Want to design an architecture? You're using your prefrontal cortex. Want to deliver a presentation in front of a group of 5,000 people? If you're calm, you're using your prefrontal cortex. Your kid wants something that you can't even afford, you got to find an emotionally intelligent way to say it, you're using your prefrontal cortex. And when your wife wants to go to the same restaurant for 400 days in a row, and all you want is to go for Ethiopian, but you won't eat that, it's your emotional intelligence that's going to provide the logical reasoning to tell your wife we're not going to get a hamburger for 400 days in a row. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So I say this about the prefrontal cortex, and what happens when you get stressed? That prefrontal cortex shuts off. The amygdala, which is responsible for freezing, fight, or flight, is what kicks in. Now, the amygdala is great when my cat sees a bird and she wants to go track that bird and bring me home bird, which doesn't make me happy, but my cat does it every day. That's a time for the amygdala, for that bird to try and fly away from my scary cat, Cindy. But when the amygdala kicks in, we can't logical reason. We can't say things, and I promise you, every one of you has said something to a good friend or a colleague that you regret. And that's because your prefrontal cortex shut down and your amygdala kicked in. And that's not exactly the optimal part of our brain to have logical conversations. So we're going to talk now about how do you control it. So, Todd, I'm a believer of meditation. Meditation has helped me relax. What could you describe what is meditation and the types of meditation and how it can help people?
A meditation, simply put, is having an object of concentration, directing our awareness toward that object of concentration, and then attempting to hold our concentration on that object of meditation. And there can be a moment where then there is a lack of awareness of me and you and or subject and object, where there's the potential that subject and object become one, or some sort of unity or unification process. But that's like one of the goals that over a long period of meditation, or practicing meditation over many, many years, might come to fruition. But at the really beginning level, just having a simple object to focus on. And there are so many different objects that we can choose. Some people choose to utilize a visualization, for example, holding an image in the mind's eye. I mean, in relation to like the type of work that you're doing, if some people use visualization in the sense of something that they want, or like they're trying to like bring some sort of wealth into their life. So like they visualize money, or, like people pick any number of things to focus on. Some people that are religious choose something that fits in with their religion. Someone might choose to practice with their eyes open and pick a candle, and they might just gaze at the candle. And one of my favorite techniques is to the object of concentration is to observe the respiration, or to just simply observe the breath moving in through the nose and out of the nose. So in a real simple sense, the act of taking the thinking mind, which is moving often very quickly. In the realm of yoga, there's a word called vritti, and a vritti is like a revolution or a twisting. I always think of vrittis as like a hurricane of thought, or like a tornado of thought. And so part of the purpose of yoga is to attempt to calm that constant churning of the mind down a couple notches. And so when we pick something to focus on, something to concentrate on, then instead of just kind of riding the thoughts, or when the thoughts are really wild and tumultuous and we get kind of caught up in that, instead of just staying caught up in that storm, there's this idea that if we direct our concentration toward a single object of focus, then the mind does start to respond. The thinking processes either slow down, or maybe become just more creative, or in a slightly more positive direction. So instead of thinking really negative thoughts like I'll never get this job, or I'll never get this promotion, or I'll never be able to finish all this homework, and all these sort of negative thoughts that can come about, by picking an object of concentration, practicing, attempting to hold our concentration there, then ultimately we're working like really deep within to manifest this ability to concentrate, to feel positive, to feel a sense of ease and less worry, less stress. So that in a nutshell is how I would define meditation.
Okay, so to summarize that, it's basically taking your focus and focusing on something other than the things that are stressing you out.
Correct.
Whether that be thinking of the word Om in your mind and repeating it every 5 seconds, whether it be feeling the quality of the breath as it comes in and out, or my personal favorite, I have a visualization place where I actually go to this place and there's a beautiful lake, and there's this beautiful tiger by that lake, and the tiger says, come sit next to me. And that's sort of my place. And every time I go there, something interesting happens. But you know me, I like cats of all kinds. So to me, a cat is highly relaxing. So good. And maybe we'll do a little demo of that in a little bit, because I want people to experience that.
Okay.
Now, we're going to talk about breathing and anxiety, and I feel like we should get into the autonomic nervous system for a minute before we get here.
Yes.
So, we as humans have an autonomic nervous system which takes care of us automatically. Now, I don't know why we can't call it an automatic nervous system, but it's called the autonomic nervous system. For example, if you walk into a hot room, you sweat. If you actually are nervous, you sweat. If you're stressed out, your blood vessels constrict in your extremities and all the blood goes to your heart and lungs and your trunk, so you can fight or run away from a lion or a mugger on the subway, what have you. And these things happen automatically. Your heart rate speeds up. When you're stressed, your heart rate speeds down. Breathing happens automatically too. I promise you, if you don't breathe, you're not going to be happy for a couple minutes. I promise you. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people stop breathing, and we had helped them breathing in my career in medicine, also as a firefighter paramedic. So, so the key is breathing happens automatically, but I just controlled my breathing. I just did something. So breathing happens automatically, but you control it. Now, if we take that autonomic nervous system and we break it down into its components, we basically have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Both are needed. But if you live in the wrong one too long, you'll get sick. So for example, the other day I saw a kid in the middle of the street by my house, and I saw a car coming. And I don't run fast on my broken foot, but let me tell you, I went out so fast and grabbed that kid. Now, when I did it, my eyes dilated, I'm sure, my heart rate went up, and I pulled that kid into safety because I had to. It needed to be done. And that was why my sympathetic nervous system kicked in. And that was a good thing. So the sympathetic nervous system is constricting your blood vessels, speeding up your heart rate, making you sweat, and making you very focused on survival. Now that's great under that circumstance. It's also great if a mugger attacks you in the New York City subway. Quite frankly, it's also good if a lion's chasing you down your street. You better figure out a strategy to get away from that lion. Although I still have visions of lion from the movie Born Free, that Elsa the Lion, but that's neither here nor there. Now, if you're laying in bed at night and you're relaxed and your heart's thump doing this thing in your chest and you're nauseous and you're sweating, that will be very bad for your body long term. Your body will bring in extra cortisol. It'll eat your muscles. It'll raise your blood sugar, putting you in the diabetic range. And it will put an undue workload on your heart by high blood pressure. You'll get an enlarged heart, and at some point that can kill us. So we don't want to be there, except when we need to be there. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system is the exact opposite. It helps us relax. So when my wife is having us rewatch the Beverly Hills 90210 episodes from 1990, which apparently she told me we're watching now, so of course I do what I'm told, I'm pretty relaxed when I watch that. If I take Todd's yoga class, by the time I am done, I am really relaxed. Especially if I take a yin class or whatever, I end up relaxed no matter what it is. And when you're relaxed, your heart rate goes down, your blood pressure goes down, your digestion improves, your cortisol goes down, which means your immune system's stronger and you're healthier. And of course, your breathing slows down. But breathing is the bridge between the automatic part of the nervous system and the part of these things that happen. So by the right kinds of breathing, we can come down. Now, there's lots of breathing techniques. I'm a lover of box breathing, but any of these breathing techniques are there. Todd, could you talk about some breathing techniques that are good for anxiety? Maybe demo some too, but let's talk about one and when you would use it versus another and when you would use it.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. One of the really well-known ones for calming and for reducing anxiety is what's called a 1-to-2 ratio. So when we look at breathing practices, they'll be mapped out in what are considered like a ratio. It's really simple. For example, a 1-to-2 ratio means that you would breathe in for 1 second and breathe out for 2 seconds. So if we just do the math, if we breathe in for 4, we would try to exhale out for 8. So this one where there's a long, slow exhalation is believed to be very good for bringing us back into that rest and repair mode out of the fight or flight mode. So now also a lot of the breathing techniques, it's different in each school that you go to. So the way that I practice is breathing through the nose, in and out through the nose. But you'll come across other schools that will say breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. And there's other reasons why some people won't breathe through their nose. They'll need to breathe through their mouth. But the way that I typically practice and teach this one is just a big inhale for about 1, 2, 3, 4. And then an exhale for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And if I try that and I find that that's too long of an exhale, I'm not able to control the breath for that long, then we just shorten it so that, say, it's like a 2-second inhale to a 4-second exhale. And so this way, this breathing technique is extremely effective. I recommend that you try it at any point that you feel stress. I'll give a good example. Last night, I was leaving the studio. I was driving in my car, and I made a turn. I checked in my rearview mirror. I saw someone way back there. I thought I had time to go around the car. And the moment that I started to go around, I looked up and that person was right on me. And so I quickly got back over to the left, and that person was obviously wanting to road rage with me, because no matter how slow I went, they kept slowing down to try to just get me to interact. And I knew in my mind, I right away said, I am not going to interact with this situation, right? Like, no matter what, there's a lot of like intense energy going on. So let me just take it easy. And so right away, I just started breathing in through my nose for about 1, 2, 3, and exhale for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, and so now while driving, we do want to be careful about doing any type of pranayama that would involve, or I'm sorry, when I use the word pranayama, this word references breath control. So pranayama in yoga is the word for breathing practices, basically. And so we do want to be careful about holding our breath. And naturally, of course, you're not going to close your eyes and do really intense breathing exercises. But this one is so simple. It can be done even while you're driving. It can be done while you're walking. It can be done while you're sitting behind a desk. It can be done in any setting. And what I noticed, like, I started to feel my palms sweat. I started feeling my heart race a little bit. I had a little bit of anxiousness because I felt like this person was really trying to, I just made me nervous. So when I brought that breath in right away, it just reminded me, that's right, I'm in control of this situation. And right away, I was able to get my heart rate to get back to a little more regular, my palms a little less sweaty. And I didn't like engage in that first reaction of like, oh, I want to get angry or I want to retaliate. So I guess I just wanted to get a real life example of when I noticed even just yesterday that this breathing technique worked really well for me. Did that answer your question, Mike?
I think that's great. And maybe we'll work through some of these towards the end. But
Okay.
yeah, the key is breathing can really help. Todd mentioned pranayama because that's the yoga term. But whether we're talking about an ujjayi breathing, which he'll demonstrate, an inhale and exhale, a different kind, or box breathing, all of these work. It's actually interesting. I had a similar situation. It was going back a while ago.
Yeah.
And I was training with some SWAT members and some special operations warriors that were retired, and that's what they were doing for fun. And somebody literally was behind us, and they're hunking, they're sticking their hands out the window, and they're screaming at me. And all of these people from this community are either laughing or they're relaxed, and they're saying, good thing we can stay calm over in this situation, because people like us with this kind of training don't need to be responding to that kind of ridiculous threat.
Great point.
In fact, I'd say the more serious your skills are, the more calm it is. If you're the CEO of a business, you can't afford to upset people. You have to stay calm. If you're a well-trained martial artist like me, you have to be calm, because if you react to the people reacting to you, you might do things you regret later. And quite frankly, if you want a promotion, you want people to like you, right? And you want people to count on you, and you want people to trust you. So again, you've got to be controlled. I like that. So one of the things I want to talk about is sitting is not the best thing in the world for you. It's just not. And, when people sit on a computer, they hunch forward. And as they're hunching forward, their pectorals and their biceps are getting tight. They're being pushed into this kind of position. And there's an actual term called tech neck. And tech neck actually comes from people being hunched over, from being, there. And then as we crunch forward, our hip flexors get tight, which keep us from being able to stand up. We start getting into this position, and not only are we not getting exercise, not only is our blood not circulating optimally, but we're predisposing ourselves for neck and back pain. And what is one of the most common pain conditions in the US? Back pain. Now, here's the next thing. Back pain and neck pain might actually not be real. It could be coming from muscle spasms related to being contracted all day long, or it can come from being stressed. So I'm sure there's some kind of office yoga or chair yoga we can do for our keyboard warriors, specifically. Like, there's people out there in software engineering that sit behind a desk all day, or cloud engineering that sit behind a desk. We cloud architects and enterprise architects, we sit behind a desk a fair amount to type, but it's not quite that bad because we're meeting people and we're talking to people. But a lot of people are there. So could you either talk or demonstrate some basic chair yoga or office yoga things people could do?
Absolutely, Mike. I mean, right when you started mentioning that, I noticed I was kind of rounding forward and staring at the camera. And so just you talking about it reminded me, oh yeah, that's right. Let me try to sit up a little bit straighter with my back. So I am seated in a chair. What I'll do is I'll scoot my chair back so that you can see in the camera.
That's good. It's working.
Down just a little bit, kind of like so. That'll probably work. All right. So let me make sure my head is in the camera. Okay, good. So, I mean, what you're talking about, Mike, absolutely. The main thing that happens is this rounded forward position. And so the muscles on the front of the chest, you have the pec major muscle. This gets overly constricted and tight, so we tend to round here. As these muscles tighten, the muscles along the back, what are called the erector spinae muscles, these are these long cord-like muscles that go all the way down from the base of your spine. They come up, they attach onto the ribs and onto the spinal cord, and they also, some of them come all the way up to the base of the neck, which is called the occiput. So when we stay in this rounded position, you just mentioned, Mike, about the tech neck, and that's this idea of where we're kind of in this forward head position, which causes a ton of strain on the back of the neck. When the muscles on the back of the neck get strained, it can cause headaches, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So one really simple chair yoga technique is just it depends on what type of chair you're in. And I do need to make mention of this, is if you are on a rolly chair, please be careful, because I don't want you to make a movement where the chair rolls out from behind you. I'm on a classic just folding chair. And so a great one is just to reach back and to practice pressing the chest forward and pulling the shoulders back. And what this does is it's taking us from a flexed spinal position, and it's bringing us into what's called spinal extension, where we're basically back bending. Now, there's a really classic yoga pose routine called cow and cat. Cow pose is where you are in the expression of back bend, and cat pose is where we're in the expression of flexion or forward rounding or forward bending position. And then what we can do to actually up the ante here is to do a breathing exercise where we coordinate the inhale and the exhale with the movement of our body while we're in the chair. And this is something, while you're watching now, if you want to practice with me, it's super simple. So in the case of having the ability to hang on to the side of the chair, I'm going to inhale while I push my chest forward and pull the shoulders back. And you can even lift your chin up a little bit. And then when you exhale, you do that little nose, you round your spine, and you can switch your hands to your knees. Now you can even just hold your knees. You can put your hands on your knees. And when you inhale, you try to sit up as straight as you can. You pull your shoulders back and lift your chin up. And when you exhale, you let your head move forward and down, and you round your spine and you stretch your back. So this motion is really the foundation of all yoga practice, flexion and extension of the spine. Because if we have overly constricted musculature around the back and neck and low back, as you probably have already felt before, it's painful and the muscles seize up. So the solution, yoga recognizes what is the problem. The problem is not breathing deeply. The problem is pain in the body. What is the solution? According to yoga, we start moving and breathing. It's a very simple solution, and that's why it works. It's so simple. So let me take you through, let's do 5 of them together. And we're gonna work on a 1-to-1 ratio. That means we're gonna breathe for about 5 seconds in, and we're gonna breathe 5 seconds out. If you can close your mouth and breathe through your nose, yes. If you have a hard time breathing through the nose, maybe you're blocked up or you have a deviated septum, or maybe you're getting over a cold, then open the mouth, breathe through the mouth, no problem. All right, let's begin.
Before we begin, everyone try this and let us know how you feel in the chat box. Do you feel it? I know I will, but let us know. Give it a shot.
Good point, Mike. Yeah, we love feedback, everybody. So even if you just say yes or no, let us know. All right. So exhale your air, breathe out of the nose. Okay, begin. Inhale, breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Push your chest forward. Exhale, breathe out. 1, 2, 3. Round your spine, drop your head, tuck your chin. Inhale, breathe in through your nose, fill your lungs, pull your shoulders back, lift your chin, look up. Exhale, let your head drop forward, round your back, gently stretch the muscles. Good. Inhale, breathe in, lift the chest, pull your shoulders down and back, lift your chin, look up. Exhale, drop your head forward, round the spine, squeeze the muscles in your abdomen. Good. 2 more. Inhale, lift your chin, pull your shoulders back, press your chest forward, chin up. Exhale, relax your head forward and down, press your back so you round your spine. 1 more. Inhale, extend your spine, stretch in the front, contract the back, lift your chin. Exhale, contract the front, round your spine, and just drop your head down. And once you finish doing the back and forth motion, come into as straight of an upright position as you can. Good. So this is a really simple one. This one works great. Flexion, extension of the spine can be done in the chair. Another one, basically what I'll do right now is I'm going to point out the main movements of the spine. And the first 2 that we went through, the flexion, extension, are, in my opinion, the most important to really start to utilize on a daily basis. I recommend doing this right when you wake up. I recommend doing it all day long throughout your workday. The next one, the ability that we have to do is called spinal rotation. And so a good chair yoga spinal rotation exercise is to put one hand. So if you're seated on your chair, put your left hand on your right knee. If you can either grab the seat back that you're on, or if you can take your hand onto the back of the chair, depends on how flexible your shoulder is. But basically, we'll utilize the right hand on the back of the chair, the left hand on our right knee, to create this rotational motion where you turn your chin over your right shoulder, so it helps to stretch your neck as well. Now, when we twist, it is a little bit more challenging to breathe. And let me just explain the way our breathing muscle works. You have what is called a diaphragm. The diaphragm muscle is the breathing muscle. It extends from the front of the rib cage at the base of your sternum. It attaches underneath all the way around your rib cage, all the way to the back. And so it goes up and down, just like a car piston. When the piston pulls down and the oil flows in, or the gas flows in, or the fluid flows in, and then when the piston goes up, the fluid comes out. The other way I like to think of it is like a syringe. If the syringe at the top, like where the needle is, the top of the syringe is here at your nose, and the bottom, when the syringe pulls down, the diaphragm muscle contracts, and that draws air in through the nose and down into your lungs. When you exhale, the diaphragm muscle relaxes, and the air then it leaves the body. I say that because when we twist, it puts pressure on your breathing muscle. So even though there's a little pressure when you go into a rotation, and you don't have to go really deep. I think one of the biggest mistakes most beginners make is we think, I'm just going to go 110% the first time I try it. I recommend do like 50%, just a gentle rotational motion, and then try to breathe in really deep. Now, because you have a little bit of compression in your lower body, when you breathe in, let the air expand into the front of your chest, into the top of your rib cage, and even into the back of the rib cage. If you can twist to your right, let's just practice breathing in and out of the nose here. Breathe in through the nose. Breathe out of the nose. Good. Breathe in through your nose. Breathe out of the nose. That was 2. We're going to do one more. Breathe in through the nose and breathe out of the nose. Good. And then, of course, we're going to go to the other direction. I'm just going to turn my chair so my face will be towards you. But basically, all we're doing is taking our right hand to our left knee, our left hand onto the back of the chair. Gently rotate your body to the left. Let your left shoulder draw back. Turn your chin towards your left shoulder. And I want you to practice 3 deep breaths. Ready? Exhale. Begin. Inhale. Exhale. That's 1. Breathe in. Breathe out. That's 2. Breathe in through your nose. And breathe out. 3. Good. And then return back to the center. So now you have 2 exercises. I'm just going to give you a quick recap. You have flexion. You have extension. You have twisting to the right. You have twisting to the left. The third main motion that you can make with your spine is a side bend. So a good way to work a side bend. Now, if you can reach your right arm up and just stretch over toward the side, this is a great way to do it. I know not everybody's shoulder flexibility allows for the arm to go all the way above the head. What I'm doing here is I'm just taking my left hand and I'm putting it on the side of my chair where my waist is, or my hip. I'm taking my right arm and reaching up. And I'm just pressing the right side of my body over to the side. When we side bend, it's called lateral flexion. And what this does is that you have muscles in between all of your ribs that are called your costal muscles. And so when you side bend and you breathe in really deep, you're pressing a lot of air into your right side lung area. And this will help to stretch and release all these muscles here in your intercostals. And of course, let's do the other side. So if your right hand is down and your left arm is up, press into the side body bend and open up your side, your rib cage. Take a really big breath in through your nose, fill up completely. And then when you exhale, you can release and let your left arm come down. So now we just basically went through all the main motions of the spine: forward, back, rotate right, rotate left, side bend right, side bend left. And these are really great exercises. And what we did is we combined our breath with the movement. And so this is a really great technique. Not only are we practicing breathing, but we're moving the body, getting some airflow going, getting some circulation happening. And this can have a profound effect in gaining clarity, focus, and concentration.
You know, it's pretty interesting to me, especially from a mobility perspective, because what causes most pain? It's often being too tight and not being able to move correctly.
Correct.
For example, if the big toe, otherwise known as the hallux, doesn't have 60 degrees of extension on it, what happens is the person can't walk properly, then their ankle takes too much of the load, which means their hip takes too much of their load, which means their back takes too much of their load. And the next thing you realize, you've got a patient that has neck and shoulder pain because they've got a problem in their big toe.
Yes.
And, you know, I used to see this in my clinic all the time. Before I went down the pain management techniques, I would send people to physical therapy. And I've lived in a physical therapy environment a lot of my life, especially after an injury. And one of the things that was pretty interesting to me from a research perspective was they did researches on breathing. And then things like sit and reach tests and things like that, where they looked at a person's mobility. And just breathing slowly was enough to enhance their mobility almost as much as stretching by relaxing the muscles. And then they did other studies which showed the mobility increase of stretching, which is true. And what hit me about yoga, because I really was heavily involved in this research about 15 years ago, 16 years ago, was that yoga combines the breathing and the stretching all at the same time. And that was the genius in there for me, is it hit two techniques.
Mm.
And, it's interesting. I can remember it like it was literally yesterday. It was about 17 years ago, probably closer to 18 years ago when I first walked into your studio. Because I was told you will go to yoga 3 times a week for your next belt promotion.
Yeah.
And it was like a prison sentence to me, or at least that's what I thought it was. And it was your wife that taught that first class. And I walked in there and I had given like 6 presentations that day. All I really wanted to do was go to martial arts and hit the bag and spar, to get rid of that excess stress. And then maybe get a cheeseburger when I was done with the beer. And I took that first class in your studio. And my wife was with me, and my wife's a gymnast, not a yogi. But midway through, the two of us looked at each other and we whispered to each other in Greek how good we felt. And I left, I think it was a 90-minute class in those days that you had.
Yes.
I left that class and I felt so good. And I remember that desire for that hamburger and a beer turned into salmon and vegetables. And it was like my whole mind and body had shifted that fast. And then, of course, in those days, you were closed on certain days of the week. You didn't really have any evening classes, so I couldn't get to your studio as often as I wanted. So then I did an exploratory journey and took 1,000,001 private lessons and went everywhere. And no matter what, the only yoga I ever liked was your studio. And I mean, I tried anywhere, and it's 50 miles for me to get to your studio, and I still managed to get there at least once a week, and the rest of the time it's via Zoom. But, it was that much of an impact that it made on my life. So let's talk about box breathing, because box breathing is the kind of breathing that I can work with a firefighter. I can work with it with a warrior. I can work with it with a professional athlete, and I have. And by the way, you've worked with professional athletes, right?
Yes. Yes. From all gamuts: golf, tennis, surfing, pickleball, no joke, pickleball pros. Yeah, gymnast. I've had a chance to work with one of the Williams sisters. I've had a chance to work with people in the Woods family. I've had opportunity to work with, there's a lot of pro golfers around here. So golfers, I notice a lot of the pro golfers nowadays that are doing really well are big fans of yoga. We have people we've had pro NFL players coming in. We have a baseball training center very close to us here. And so we get spring training baseball players that are in town. So yes, we have a host of professional athletes that have come through the door and all swear by yoga on so many levels, in terms of mobility, in terms of concentration, in terms of keeping the head game in place. And so, we have, Mike. I feel very grateful for that opportunity, but yes.
And before I get to one of the common things that I see when I work with very high performance people is they're under a lot of stress.
Yes.
Any of your professional athletes have a bad day, it can totally destroy their lives. But they also have a level of focus with them.
Yes.
And I can tell you, when I train architects or when I work with other people, the ability to focus enough to get directions when you hear them or get requirements, which is an architect's biggest job, most people struggle there.
Yes.
And to me, it's focus. I personally do a breathing exercise before every single meeting. You know me, I get my yoga practice in and physical therapy practice in every morning. But I can tell you, if I don't, in fact, my chief operating officer, Chris, would basically say, Mike, you haven't practiced yoga yet today. You don't work. You better go practice yoga. You don't look good and you don't look happy.
We hear this often, people saying like, they're when their husband or wife is coming regularly, that their spouse will be like, you need to go to yoga. Like you're getting stressed out. You're stressing me out. You need to do something for yourself and actually get your energy in check, get your mood in check, as well as, like that overall feeling that we get from yoga. I mean, it's amazing. I agree, Mike. I've had, when I got into yoga, I remember walking into the class, and it was a hot yoga class. So it was a particular method called Bikram yoga. And I had taken different yoga classes throughout my life, but when I went into that, I think I was in that right point in my life where I wanted to make a change. I was needing a little bit of, like a good positive direction to go down. And it was so challenging. I mean, it was so challenging. I thought, and you go into yoga and you just think, oh, this will be for like wimps, or this is going to be so easy. And I'll probably just be sitting there chanting Om, or they're just going to have me do a breathing exercise. And what's the point of that? But in this particular method, the hot yoga, the Bikram yoga, it was so challenging that I just felt so good after it. I couldn't even believe how good I felt after, even though it was one of the most challenging things I ever done. And I didn't think I was going to make it through the class afterward because I'd sweated so intensely. And the challenge of holding the concentration like that in the poses was just next level for me. It completely, after that one class, I was like, this is all I want to do. I was so hooked. All I wanted to do was go to yoga. I started going to yoga every single day. So I can attest exactly to what you're saying. And, it just gets me so excited to be involved in it still and to be able to interact with people every day with the yoga realm. And so that's why I'm so pleased that you're such a big fan of it, Mike, because you're in the tech world and you're working with all these really elite, high level professionals. And I'm just so thankful that you can see the value in it and that you're promoting it. You're actively promoting health and wellness. Like, not only are you coaching people to figure out how to get a really good job in this sort of industry, but you're also saying, hey, look, to do this, what I found, yoga works, and let me show you some techniques. So, I really admire that you're doing this for folks.
And thank you for that, Todd. For me, we've got to be whole as a person.
Yeah.
If we're not whole, and this comes from my firefighter paramedic days, if you're not okay, you can't help anyone else. So that's why when you're on an airplane, they say to put the oxygen mask on you before you put it on others. Because if you don't have oxygen, you're not in a position to do so.
Good point.
I can tell you recently, in the last year,
yeah,
I've had a couple of students that had a hard time delivering a presentation. They were just stiff and they looked anxious. And I did sentence them to yoga just the same way I was sentenced to yoga. In fact, I recently saw one of them deliver a presentation that was so good. And it totally blew me away. And we asked him, you changed like this overnight. What happened? And he said, you sentenced me to yoga, so I found box breathing, and I use it a couple of times per day. And I was just blown away and delighted to see it. So
awesome, Mike.
One of the things I want to get across is yoga doesn't have to be out there and wacky. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people get this impression. I've been to a lot of yoga studios, and some of them feel really wacky, and some of them feel really good. So when you find a gym or you find a yoga studio, find one that works for you.
Yes.
I've been to hundreds. I only go to Todd's. If it's 50 miles away, I don't care. I may not be able to go every day, so I'll take a class via Zoom. And if I can't get there, I took Todd's 500-hour yoga instructor class just so I know how to make a yoga routine for myself. I mean, I'm not going to go out there and teach yoga. Well, that's not true. I integrate into my performance coaching with everything I do, but for me, it just makes people better. And I can tell you, I had injuries. 13 doctors told me I'd never walk again. Yoga helped me do that. I mean, I don't run great, and I don't walk great, and I certainly don't run. But your point is, it gets there.
Yes.
And I know if I can sit in a chair longer because I practice yoga. Now, I'm still trying to get a cat pose that looks as good as my cat Cindy's, because most yoga poses are named after shapes or animals.
Yes.
A cat pose was kind of when that cat stretches themselves out. I can't keep up with my cat Cindy, but I figure they named it after a cat because they're probably strategic at it. So let's talk a little bit about box breathing. And at some point, I'm assuming there's lots of questions coming in, and I want to help people with questions. But box breathing is something that I absolutely love because it works for me, and I use it multiple times per day. I use it prior to doing anything big. I use it if I have anything that matters. So if you could walk into box breathing, because I think that's something that anybody could do anywhere, anytime. And maybe walk us through and we'll do it with you.
Absolutely. So the box breath is called the box breath because here we're going to be introducing a new technique, which is called breath retention. And so it's very simple, basically holding the breath. And so we're going to be practicing what's called an inhale retention. That's when you take an inhale breath and then you hold your breath. And we're also going to be doing practicing what's called an exhale retention. And so after you exhale all of the air out of the body, you're going to hold the breath. The inhale retention is often easier for obvious reasons because you've just taken a big breath of air in. And while you're holding your breath, the body and the mind doesn't panic so much because you have air in you. The exhale breath is often the more challenging one for new students, new practitioners to feel comfortable with. But there's a way for us to work around that. The way we're going to work around it is I'm going to make the retentions in the beginning very short, very simple. So this is the approach we take in all of our classes, the way we teach, whether it's a breathing exercise or a yoga posture class, is we figure out what can you do. And once we determine what is possible, we can always then stretch that a little further, or we can challenge you a little more. Okay, so with that being said, the box is really just basically referencing a box shape. And what's going to happen is we're going to inhale for about 3 seconds. You're going to hold your breath for about 3 seconds. Then we're going to exhale for 3 seconds. And then we're going to hold the breath for 3 seconds. So we're just going to be moving inhale when the finger goes up. When the finger goes to the side, we're going to be holding. When you exhale, the finger goes down. And then when the finger goes to the side again, that's when you're gonna hold. So we're just making a box shape. Okay, and then let's start off with the 3 second. Now we might find that the 3 seconds is still a little too long, in which case we can slow it down. Now I'm gonna be counting for you. So I'm gonna keep the timing for you. But after today's class, if you utilize this breath technique on your own, you can just silently in your own head count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So like really easy. That's how you'll be able to do it on your own. All right. So it's a good idea. If you're seated already, go ahead and just kind of try to sit up nice and straight as best you can. If you're more comfortable with your back against the back of the chair, you can use the back of the chair to help you sit upright. And the idea is just go ahead and let your arms relax. So you're releasing pressure and tension off of your shoulders. If you want to have your eyes open, wonderful. Stare or focus at the screen. You're going to be able to see my finger. If you prefer to close your eyes, that is great as well. All right. Let's begin. Go ahead. We're going to breathe through the nose, ideally, unless you need to mouth breathe. Exhale all your air. Okay, good. Begin. Inhale through the nose for 1, 2, 3. Hold the breath for 1, 2, 3. Exhale for 1, 2, 3. Hold the breath for 1, 2, 3. Inhale 1, 2, 3. Hold 1, 2, 3. Exhale 1, 2, 3. Hold 1, 2, 3. One more. Inhale 1, 2, 3. Hold 1, 2, 3. Exhale 1, 2, 3. Hold 1, 2, 3. Take a regular breath in through the nose. Fill your lungs all the way. Exhale all of the air out. Let's do one more easy breath. Inhale, breathe through the nose, and exhale all of the air out. Now, just for a moment, I just want you to take a second and just observe. How do you feel? Was there any change? Do you feel more relaxed? Did it have the opposite effect? Did it make you feel more energized? Just try to build your ability to observe and just see how you feel. Very good. And I'm super curious, Mike, when you hold your breath, do you have any sense of panic, or is it very easy for you to hold your breath?
You know, it's interesting. When I first started, I did a 4 count on the inhale, exhale, and it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was told to try to work your way up to a count of 7.
Mm-hmm.
And as I try more and more difficult periods of pranayama,
Mm-hmm.
some of them actually stress me out. For
Yeah.
example, the single nostril breathing does
Yeah.
not work for me.
Yes.
I just excluded it. But
Yes.
for me, I feel much more relaxed. And here's the other thing that I noticed: when I feel relaxed, I have more energy as well. Because
Yeah.
I noticed that, when I get really stressed, it feels like I've got a big, heavy weight vest on me. And as soon as that goes away, it's there. Now, actually, it's wintertime for most of you. I mean, for Todd and me, it's 85 degrees outside. The ocean's always green. The ocean gets really cold to like 73 degrees Fahrenheit in the wintertime, and it's like 85 in the summer. But there was a retired Navy SEAL commander, Mark Devine, who was also a student of Tim Miller,
Mm-hmm.
who was an Ashtanga yoga instructor himself. And he got hired by the Navy to get people through SEAL training because it has such a high dropout rate. And one of the torture tests they use for Navy SEALs is they stick them in the Pacific Ocean for 15 minutes at a time or longer, along with not sleeping and working out all day long. But one of the torture tests is you just freeze people. And Mark Devine is actually teaching a breathing technique to stay warm, which I'm sure you're aware of. You already know that I mean Ujjayi breathing. But lots of people are going to suffer in the cold.
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually warm up your body. Now, Todd or I could do what's called Ujjayi breathing for 5 minutes, and we'd both be gross and sweaty without even moving in the chair because we know how to do it.
Yeah.
Todd's obviously better than me. He's got more experience, but I've been a student of Todd's for a pretty long time to work on it. So I actually find that Ujjayi breathing relaxes me an incredible amount. In fact, if I'm ever sitting in bed and I'm trying to fall asleep and my wife is sound asleep, and my little cat Cindy decides to start kneading on me, which she likes to do. And now I got a cat that's politely trying to show me love, but she's digging her fingernails into me by accident, trying to show me how much she loves me. My wife's sleeping and I can't fall asleep. I use Ujjayi breathing. For any of you that are in cold and freezing climates and you walk outside and you're cold, you can use Ujjayi breathing. But if you're stressed, you can use Ujjayi breathing too. So maybe, Todd, you can demonstrate this and explain this.
Yes. Let me break down as simple as I can how to do Ujjayi. The Ujjayi, the word literal translation is victory or victorious breathing, like Jai. So Ujjayi breathing is called victorious breathing. What it is called the English way to explain it is breathing with sound. The easiest way to connect with breathing with sound, well, basically what's happening in the back of our throats, we have what is called the epiglottis. When you drink water, that little flap closes off your air pipe, your windpipe, and water doesn't go down. So you have the ability that all happens automatically, like you mentioned, Mike, in the autonomic nervous system, but you have the ability to control that. What's happening is that if you have a circle like a hose that has a certain diameter and the water's rushing through it, when you constrict the hose, the water fans out and it creates more pressure, so to speak, and also more friction at the place that's traveling through. The same thing happens with the throat. So what we're doing is just constricting the air passage in the back of the throat. And this is how we're able to stretch the breath out longer. If we keep our throat all the way open, when we try to breathe and make it take longer for the air to come in, it's a big airway and it just rushes in. But if you constrict the airway, then when you breathe and you apply diaphragmatic pressure from the breathing muscle, then it causes the air can't go in as fast. And that's how we're able to stretch the length of the breath out. So how to do this? The easiest way, if you use your hand and you imagine it's a mirror, and if you want to fog a mirror, you open your mouth and you make a sound. You're just making a ha sound. When you make the sound, that's your epiglottis constricting. So the way that we learn how to make Ujjayi on the exhale is you'll breathe in normally, and when you exhale, midway through the exhale, you close your mouth. It looks and sounds like this. I'm going to do it again. You breathe in, open the mouth. The exhale is usually the easier one for people to get. The inhale is a little trickier. All that I'm doing is just keeping the squeeze in the back of the throat. Now, mouth closed, breathing in through nose. So that sound is coming from the throat. Listen to the difference if I breathe through my nose. I'm just going to sniff through my nose. Doesn't sound so pretty, sorry. So that's breathing through the nose. We're still breathing through the nose, but where we're constricting is in the throat. And this is the Ujjayi technique. Why do Ujjayi? One reason. Okay, so earlier I made mention that we need, when we're approaching meditation, or if you're in a very stressful situation, you're going in for the job interview and you're feeling your heartbeat, your palm sweat, your back sweat, your armpit sweat, whatever it is, you're feeling stress. And so you need something to focus on other than, I'm worried. What's going to happen? How am I going to do this? What we need to do is switch it over to something that is directly related to you being able to control your nervous system. So when you breathe, if you breathe with the sound, now that doesn't mean you're going to use a really strong breath, because people are going to look at you like, what is this person doing? Why are they breathing so heavy? But what you can do is just a very soft squeeze in the throat, and because you can hear the sound of the breath, your mind concentrates on the sound. So it's a technique that directly takes your attention to the sound of the breath. The other reason that Mike mentioned is that because you're creating a smaller air passageway, this actually generates heat in the body. So this is a breath that generates fire or heat. So that's why we would do it. I tried to cover the how we do it. I think let's just practice like 5 Ujjayi breaths. And sometimes when I teach, I had a new student this morning and I tried teaching the Ujjayi, and she was really confused, and it almost was frustrating for her because she was having a harder time to actually do it. So my answer is, don't worry. We don't want to stress more about learning how to do yoga and breathing exercises. We want it to help calm our stress. So just try to breathe through the nose. If you have a hard time with the Ujjayi, don't worry. We're going to practice. We got lots of time to practice together, so don't worry, but just try the best you can. Okay, so again, just come into a comfortable seated position. And for the first 3 on the exhale, I'm going to have you have your mouth open, and you're going to exhale. And when you close your mouth, I want you to keep the sound going through the throat. Let's try it together. Breathe in. Exhale, open your mouth. Midway through, close your mouth. Let's try it again. Breathe in through your nose. Exhale. Let's try it again. Breathe in. Exhale, mouth open. Midway through, close. Good job. Now I want you to breathe in through your nose, but breathe through your throat. Exhale out through the nose, through the throat. Good. Breathe in through the nose, through the throat. Breathe out through the nose, through the throat. Good. One more. Breathe in through the nose. Breathe out through the nose, through the throat. Great job. Now just breathe normal, no throat. Notice it's a lot more quiet. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Good. How do you feel, Mike?
I feel completely relaxed now, like that. So let me know in the chat box. Now, for me, Ujjayi breathing is the complete relaxing. Box breathing is the relaxed enough to be prepared for whatever life is coming my way. But tell us how you feel in the chat box.
Yeah, we'd love to know. And while people are answering that question, I just want to now blend the two techniques together, because you mentioned your appreciation for the breathing with sound, Mike, and you also mentioned the appreciation for the box breathing. So then what we can do is when we take our inhale, we can use the Ujjayi technique for the inhale. We hold 1, 2, 3, 4. We Ujjayi to get a nice long 4-second out. And we hold 1, 2, 3, 4. We inhale Ujjayi. We hold 1, 2, 3, 4, and you exhale Ujjayi. So now we're blending the two techniques together, which I recommend. I mean, I look at all of these practices from the perspective of a scientist. We need to come up with a hypothesis. We need to then come up with our procedure, and then we do the testing, and then we take our observations and we come up with our conclusion. I don't want anybody to take what we say as like, oh, they said it works, so I believe it works. What we really want to do is try these techniques, observe, does it work for me? If it doesn't, trust your intuition. And there are so many different techniques. So if this doesn't work for you, don't let that hold you back from exploring further. And I think that's really important. And if it does work, then I mean, it's a direct experience. Once you feel it, you know it. There's a wonderful saying I know from Jamaican culture, who feels it knows it. And I love that because in yoga, once you feel the benefits of it, you know it. Like it's not an intellectual thing, it's a felt thing. But thank you, Mike. Any other thoughts on that, or what kind of comments?
So let's talk a little bit about that. There's a lot of kinds of meditation.
There's a lot of kinds of meditation.
There's a Buddhist walking meditation where you walk and you try and observe as many things as possible. There's people that get themselves in a sensory deprivation tank and they float in high salt water and clothes with no lights on.
Yes.
That's meditation. Box breathing or any of these breathing techniques are meditation. Yoga is a moving meditation. And the key is try them all and then find what works with you.
Yes.
For me, Ujjayi breathing is sleepy time. Mm-hmm. And box breathing is preparation for everything. And yoga is my daily practice where if I don't get it, I'm just a cranky bear. So I make sure I get some yoga every single day. In fact, my yoga practice was a little more methodical. Todd knows this, but I have a little furry friend that likes to practice yoga with me every day. So, I have my yoga plan. Each pose or asana is 5 whole breaths. And then my cat gets there and she sits down in the center of the mat. So maybe the pose becomes 30 whole breaths until the cat gets bored and moves to another thing and I do it to the other side. But find something that works for you. And that's really the key, is finding something that works for you. So come on, I know you guys have some questions. So let's address some of the questions we're here. Don't be shy. We want to help you. So Chris, bring in a few of the questions, and then hopefully the rest of the people that are shy and scared to ask a question will just ask the question, because we really want to make you have a better life.
Good point, Mike.
Okay, from Mark. How often should we be doing spinal lengthening exercises throughout the day for optimal relief and injury prevention for those who sit for an extended period of time?
That's a great answer, Mark. I appreciate that. So my answer to you is every little bit counts. And I think that like personally, I practice an hour each day, but for me, it's taken me years to build up and to make that like a daily commitment. So with that being said, 5 minutes is a really good starting point if you're able to practice at home, if you have the discipline to be able to practice at home. And I have a YouTube channel, Native Yoga Center. I have lots of videos on my YouTube channel that you can access. And so broken down into like a 10-minute practice or a 20-minute practice, a 30-minute practice, and longer. So my answer is you don't really, I think like every little bit counts. A 5-minute practice, if you can practice for 5 minutes every day, that I believe you'll start to notice some benefit. And then optimally, if you can build in a 30-minute practice, as you start to get the ball rolling, 30 minutes also is a really good practice time, because there's this idea like it takes a little bit of time often for the nervous system to start to regulate. And for some of us, like if we're really agitated, 5 minutes, like it's not a very long period of time. So being able to dedicate more time to it each day. But I believe like if you can get a good habit going consistently, and if we pick a duration like 5 minutes, which is reasonable for most, that then we're going to get this consistency going. The prescription for successful yoga practice is consistently over a long period of time. So 5 minutes, and then once a day for 5 minutes. Now, as a tech professional like you are, then I would recommend multiple times throughout the day to work on spinal lengthening exercises. The other key ingredient, and I could talk for hours off this one question, so I'll try to keep it concise, but the one of the key ingredients is if you observe your body. Now, it is possible to do too much, like in anything. It is possible to do too much. I don't think that's going to be our problem here now, but I wouldn't recommend going into a forward flexion position and holding it for an hour. That might be way too long. So there are some people that actually do too much flexibility exercise, and they need to actually strengthen their core. And a lot of us have a little bit too much tension, and we need to emphasize a little bit more of the stretch part. One of the big misnomers with yoga is that the thing I hear all the time, one of the biggest things I've heard, I've been teaching yoga professionally for the last 23 years every day, is that I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible. And that's actually one of the biggest misconceptions, because yoga is not just a flexibility practice. It's actually a balancing of strength and flexibility, a balance of strength and flexibility practice. So to stay on topic with your question, it's a great question. I think start with 5 minutes. If you can put multiple 5-minute practices into your day, that would be wonderful. And if you are disciplined enough to be able to niche out a 30-minute practice time, that also would be really great.
And before we get to that, Todd mentioned something really important. I'm not flexible enough for yoga. Guess what? None of us are when we start.
None of us are.
Nobody's born knowing how to fly an airplane. Nobody's born a physician. Nobody's born a yogi. Nobody's born a black belt in Taekwondo. Nobody.
Nobody's born a cloud architect, Mike.
Nobody's born a cloud architect. This is all training and practice.
Yes.
And we get better by finding experts that can teach us how to get there. Now, believe me, I've had a few yoga coaches over the years. I only listen to Todd. There's a reason why, and actually another friend that he and Todd know each other, and this person taught in Todd's studio for a while, but there's a reason I only listen to Todd, because it's like anything else. There's a lot of people out there, but, there's not a lot of people that are great. And when you're really great, you can truly help others. So I love that. Nobody's born anything. We're going to do it. Now, my cat was born mobile, but the human, we have no instincts whatsoever. We will die within 3 days if our parents don't take care of us. A baby kitten knows how to survive. They're born with a 3-year-old child brain, but a human does not. We won't know how to eat. We don't know how to walk. We don't know how to do anything. Everything we are as people is learned. And here's the good news. That means you can do anything you want. All you have to do is learn it.
Yes.
So, that's the key. And we all have different aptitudes for certain things, but I think yoga is fantastic. So let's get to the next question. Oh, this is a good one, Todd.
Oh, yeah, it's a great one. Freedom Lands. I like your name. Great question.
And so the question is, what's the difference between yoga and meditation? Or are they the same? I know I have my definition, but I'll have Todd kick it off first, because this is his world.
Yes.
And I'll tell you my definition.
Yes. Okay. So great question. So let me just start chipping in on this. So in the world of yoga, there's this idea. It depends on which philosophy we're adhering to in the world of yoga. So let me just start with one particular philosophy, which is one of the most famous philosophies that is prevalent in the West for Westerners that have studied yoga. For any of you listening that are joining from India, you probably are very familiar with this, but a lot of us from the United States, Europe, and all over the place, Caribbean, Africa, when we come across yoga texts, there's one that's called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And this is like a 8-rung path. And, or let's imagine a ladder that has 8 rungs. And so the first 2 on the bottom are ethical disciplines. And so they involve like morality and how I'm going to interact with others, such as I'm going to try to not be violent. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to practice contentment. These are the basic premise of yoga. Then the third limb is posture practice. The fourth limb is breathing practice. The fifth limb is what's called pratyahara. This is where we move from the external world to the internal world. And here's where we now enter into the world of meditation. And there's 3 rungs or steps on the ladder here. There's concentration, there's meditation, and then there's a word called awakening or absorption. And there's a whole bunch of ideas around this. But the idea is that the yoga practice, the practice of posture and the practice of breath will bring us into or toward the world of meditation, that there's a preparation and then we then are ready for meditation. Now, some people visualize that ladder as a wheel with 8 different spokes in the wheel. And the idea is that if yoga is represented by the wheel, all of these attributes make up the wheel, and that even while you are practicing yoga posture, this is a part of the meditation. And when we are in a meditation pose, let's just say we take a seated position, that we are practicing a yoga pose, but we now are in the meditation. So as we advance, what usually happens for most practitioners is everything starts to get a little more connected. And we see the yoga practice as our meditation practice. And we can see that formal meditation practice is also our yoga practice, and they are one. So it's a really good question. And we can separate them and differentiate them into categories. But down the track with practice and as you advance, they can be seen as one and the same thing. Mike, how would you answer this question?
And I'm going to give you my practical, not yoga expert answer. Because Todd's answer is really that of a true yoga meditation expert. And believe me, he's a true expert. The way I see it is yoga is just a form of meditation. And whether it's a transcendental meditation where someone gives you a phrase and you just repeat it constantly, whether you're actually in a chair and you're creating a mind gym where I have a lake and I have a tiger named Teresa that just sits there and looks relaxed and I just watch the waves in the river, or whether it's box breathing, or whether it's just staring at a dot on the wall or a candle, to me, they're all forms of meditation, and yoga is just a form of them. What I like about yoga, specifically Ashtanga yoga, though it's not necessarily the best for my body, is that linking of the breath with the movement. So inhale when you go up, exhale when you go forward. So that kind of pre-programmed breathing, like if Todd were to teach an Ashtanga yoga class, and it's a 75-minute class, every breath is counted for. And, whether it's a sun salutation where there's an inhale and an exhale that's prescribed or anything, it's there. So it's very methodological. So I personally just view it as another form of meditation, but that's, an outsider's perspective. When I put on my yogi hat on, now they start part in being everything. But from a martial arts perspective, which is, I'm a martial artist that loves yoga, It's just linking a breath to a movement. Now, how many of you participated in martial arts and did something called the kata or a form? Exactly, where you do one movement, one breath, and you repeat it until you perfect it. It's the same thing. It's not that, in my mind, it's not that different than yoga. One is a combat kata, one is not. Look at Tai Chi, which most people don't realize is one of the most lethal martial arts in the world because it's supposed to look soft. If you're doing something like this or Qigong or Tai Chi, it's the same kind of thing. You're linking your breath to a movement. You're taking your focus outside of the world and you're focusing on one thing. Now, Tai Chi was brutally hard on my knees. You'd think it would be good. It's good for arthritis, but it's bad for me. But, that's my perspective. It's just, another form of meditation, and do whichever kind you like.
Good point, Mike. Great question. Thank you, Freedom Lands.
It's really a great question, Freedom Lands. Well, I know we've got more questions, but please ask. We want to help you. This is a chance to ask the kind of questions that you normally can't. We don't always have Todd, and it's very hard to find.
Oh, you froze up, Mike. Sorry, I'm going to keep talking. How does yoga and Pilates differ from one another? Thank you, Tyrone. That's a good question. So how does yoga and Pilates differ? Yoga there's an older history of yoga. Pilates is started by a man named Joseph Pilates. Joseph Pilates was a ballet practitioner. He was a dancer. So he studied dance movement through his whole life. He also was a yoga practitioner and he studied yoga. And I think how Pilates came about was he really just, from working with lots of people in the dance world, he started to take elements of yoga and he took elements of movement training and dance training, and he created a system that is focused on like core development. And the movements, like in Pilates, maybe if I had my legs out in front of me, we would maybe do these very tight, controlled little kicking movements where we have to engage into the core of the body. Yoga and Pilates are very similar. When I have students that are active yoga practitioners, they're practicing every day, they're taking it very seriously, they're working on learning the Ashtanga series. There's a series of poses that we teach that's within a tradition called Ashtanga, and it's very challenging and demanding. And sometimes people actually get injured practicing yoga, believe it or not. And I actually recommend people to go to Pilates when they have an overuse injury, like when they are doing the same thing over and over again and they get injured. And this isn't just with yoga. This could be if they're into CrossFit. This could be if they're into martial arts. It could be whatever their movement practice is. Pilates does a great job of helping people tap into the core of the body and to build core strength without really using weights. Now, in Pilates, there's the reformer, and that's like a table that people work on. And part of what Pilates does is it isolates the awareness into a certain area of the body and then just focuses on strengthening that area. Yoga does do the exact same thing, in my opinion. I guess where are we going to find the differences? Yoga has a whole catalog of specific poses: cat pose, downward dog pose, upward facing dog pose, the camel pose, the triangle, the twisting triangle. There's a whole host of positions that are very uniquely yoga poses. And in Pilates, they don't really use any of those terms or names. I also, one of the Pilates classes that I've taken, and Pilates is challenging. Like I thought, oh, wow, I'm a great yoga practitioner. If I think to myself, I'm such a great yoga practitioner, Pilates will be a piece of cake. No, it kind of trains the body a little differently. So I am a fan of cross training with different modalities because I love movement, and so I really appreciate Pilates and yoga and core strength working like with Indian clubs. Mike got me using some Indian clubs, which I really love, like work swinging these weights around to build mobility and strength. So I am a fan of cross training, but to just stay specific to your question, those are the main that's the main distinction between yoga and Pilates, is that Pilates, a more modern representation of yoga and physical therapy. Mike, how would you answer that question?
So I would actually look at it for different reasons. Joseph Pilates was a yoga person and a dancer, but Pilates was born out of necessity. Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, that the original yogis were the warriors of India.
Yoga, that's true. Yoga was utilized as a form of combat training for some people. So it has a very broad history, and its uses is very diverse. But yes, actually, like we have a pose in yoga called warrior pose. So yes, yoga was used for physical training in a lot of respects, because for battle, for territory, right? So most of the time when we think of yoga, we think of it as more of like a contemplative, meditative practice that's used to kind of deepen our appreciation for life, because we just are getting into, being aware of the mind and being aware of the body and doing positive practices that help enhance this. However, yes, it actually is used as a form of for physical training for combat, or it was, at least in the olden times.
So yoga was born as a means to raise the energy concentration of the warrior. Pilates was actually built out of necessity. So Joseph Pilates was put in prison, and he was trying to find a way when he was in prison to stay fit and to keep his core strength. So what he did is he adopted some yoga things and tuned them for staying fit while you're in a confined prison cell. Now, the reality was leveraging one's body weight to train their core stability and core strength was a very smart idea. Now, personally, and the physical therapy world has adopted Pilates, not yoga. And the reason for this is yoga has some bending and twisting poses, which the physical therapy world is afraid of. Now, the physical therapists all still like yoga, provided they don't do the bending and twisting or the loaded flexion poses, whereas Pilates is more there. But I can tell you from the perspective of a strength and conditioning coach, because that was something I did for a period of time, and I can tell you that I think everyone should participate in some form of yoga. Yoga for the mind, yoga for mobility, yoga for stability. Personally, I think there's much better ways to build core strength than actual Pilates. There's rotational training that's used with pro athletes. There's true core things like a deadlift or a squat or a standing overhead press or a pull-up. So I think there's better ways to train core stability than Pilates that are out there. But I think everybody should use yoga. Now, if we actually look at professional athletes, a lot of them have some form of yoga in their training. They used to have ballet in their training. When I was a kid, football players would actually do ballet to build that mobility, stability, and body control. You get all that out of yoga. But, there's these Kaiser gear that uses pneumatic resistance. It's common with pro athletes. There's speed training, agility training, coordination training, athletic training that athletes do. There's power training, which is different than strength training, which is different than power endurance. So I personally love blending yoga with any strength and conditioning routine. But Pilates was designed by a political prisoner while he was in jail to stay in shape. So I think it's good. I really do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I feel like there's better ways to build core strength. But Pilates is great in a physical therapy environment. It's also great if you're stuck and you're traveling. And all those things I actually like to combine. But for me, yoga is a definite. Everybody should have some form of yoga practice.
Yes.
Now, my yoga practice doesn't look like everybody else's yoga practice. It's tuned. I tune it. I've got 5 herniated discs, 2 torn rotator cuffs, labral tears in both hips, arthritis everywhere. So I work with people like Todd that can customize yoga to make it healthy for me. And Pilates is kind of the same thing. It's adapted to you and your body. So similar, but one's goal is more core stability and core strength. One's goal is more of a meditation with an emphasis on breathing, with an emphasis on the mind. And yoga is pretty good for mobility too. So that's the way I would separate them.
Good point, Mike. Good answer. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. And we're both going to have different perspectives here.
Oh, yeah.
What are your thoughts on a bed of nails and meditation, like lying on a bed of nails or walking through cold? I'm assuming that's what he's referring to.
Yes, Emmanuel, how are you? Nice to see you. Yeah, so there's this whole tradition in India or in the realm of yoga and meditation of being able to practice mind over matter. And I think that this is a really important concept to embrace and to strive for, the ability to be in a challenging situation, whether it's a mentally challenging situation, a physically challenging situation, or even an emotionally challenging situation, and to become aware of that challenge and to harness the mind and the reaction to sensation in a way that we stay calm. The bed of nails is an example of how people would demonstrate this. And there's a whole bunch of different demonstrations that people use all over the world to demonstrate mind over matter. We have people that are going like Wim Hof, or someone who I've gotten a chance to meet over in Finland, Magnus Appelberg. They go into the freezing cold water. They cut a hole in the ice, and these guys are spending up to an hour in ice water, demonstrating mind over matter. Now, the bed of nails, a very sharp surface, laying on it, mind over matter. These require intense training and is not something that the average person can just go and lay on a bed of nails and not experience intense pain and be able to hold on. So this is something that requires a lot of training. Let me just be really honest with you. I think it's a little extreme. I think that what happens is but this is my own opinion, so this is just my opinion. I think that because I've done this sort of stuff. I've done things that other people can't do with the attempt to demonstrate that I have this really strong ability to control my mind in a very challenging situation. But ultimately, I'm not sure how important it really is. And I have to constantly differentiate between, is this my ego wanting to just look like I'm a perfect yogi or a perfect athlete? Or is this an actual feat that is good for my overall health? And in some of these mind over matter feats, they get quite dangerous, and we actually could get quite close to the edge, meaning death. So I feel like they play a good part for some of us to really see what we're made of. But I also think that the yoga that I follow now is more of the middle path, where we are trying to balance. I attempt to try to find the happy medium. And I'm aware that too much of something can actually not be good and can be destructive. And so I'm a big fan of the middle path. Now, the bed of nails is a little bit extreme. And I could list a whole bunch of different things that people do in the name of mind over matter that I think are just a little bit too extreme. So while I believe it's really good for some, I'm a little bit more of a fan of coaching or encouraging finding the happy medium. Mike, what are your thoughts on this?
And Emmanuel, it's always good to see you. And you met Todd, you met Emmanuel in Orlando.
Yes.
And
Remember,
so,
man.
I have mixed feelings on it. And I'm going to tell you why.
Yeah, please.
Most people don't know what they can possibly achieve. Most don't. And I was 14 years old, and I had gone over to my uncle and cousin's house. And, my uncle was a Marine, and my cousin was in the process of joining the Marine Corps, or at least going into second enlistment, second time to officer candidate school. And I was defeated by something. They were giving me Marine Corps physical training every day to toughen me up and grow me into what they called the man, like a tough guy. And I said, I can't do this. And I was met with a response that I was not expecting. All of a sudden, they dragged this rucksack down the stairs, this big giant backpack, and they filled it with rocks, and they made me walk for 30 kilometers. And they told me not to come back, and my cousin went with me, obviously, until I could possibly walk 30 kilometers with this. Now, I was a skinny kid. This rucksack, this backpack weighed as much as I did. And, I gutted it out at 3 miles an hour. About 7 hours later, I came back. I felt like I was going to die. But what the end of the day was? I realized I could do it. And they said, you thought you couldn't do this. I know you knew you couldn't do this. So now you know you're capable of doing more than what you're at. So look, I don't recommend just jumping on a bed of nails in a willy-nilly approach. I think it's a recipe for disaster, but I do think you should know what you're able to do. Now, I draw it back to me in Taekwondo. I was an 8-year-old kid, and they said, break this board. And I did. And why were we breaking boards? I mean, we already knew how to punch, and it was to build the internal confidence in us that you were able to do more than you thought. Whether you're punching a bag or punching a board, it doesn't matter, but most people are afraid of the board. So I do believe in conquering fear, but I think there's safer ways to conquer fear than lying on a bed of nails. There's certain obstacle courses which could be terrifying, but the point of where I think it's good is finding something that you don't think you can do and proving to you that you can do it. I think there's a lot safer options than a bed of nails, personally. But, whatever it is, I do think it's good to find your limits, test them in a supervised manner, and go after them.
One of the bed of nails type of activity I got involved in is Vipassana meditation retreat, where we go and sit for 10 days in silence, and we sit on a cushion for 10 hours and 45 minutes a day. Now, why this is still extreme. Most people are going to have a very, very difficult time with this. I had an incredibly difficult time with this. However, if you're just sitting on a meditation cushion and you're feeling incredible pain in your hips and your back from sitting and not getting up off the cushion for up to 3 hours, I mean, that is the equivalent of doing something like sitting on a bed of nails, but you won't really get hurt. And that's where I like to, find challenge, like maybe from the perspective of, say, becoming a cloud architect. If I think, wow, where would I even begin? And slowly I start to train, and slowly I start to read and study, and slowly I start to interact, and slowly I start to plan out strategy and architecture, and slowly, and before you know it, I'm a little bit better than I was. And the same thing, but you're not going to get hurt. Like maybe from staring at the computer, our eyes could get fatigued. I guess we could argue maybe you could, I don't know, something bad maybe could happen, but it's a fairly safe activity to study and learn something, but you're still going to be incredibly challenged. Yeah. And that's what I think it is. I think we got to find ways that we can be challenged, but we are not really putting ourselves in an extreme harm, and that for me is, and that's why I think meditation and yoga is so great. Because we can, say, just do a forward bend and we can feel extreme challenge with our hamstrings, and we can feel incredible discomfort. but we aren't really, nothing bad is going to happen from just trying to fold forward and relax the hamstrings. Whereas opposed to skydiving, overcoming our fear and jumping out of a plane, there's a little more risk involved. So that's where I would kind of meant when I was saying like the middle path. I think let's find things that can challenge us and make us stronger and better, but where we still are going to be able to come home to our friends and family at the end of the day.
Exactly. In the strength and conditioning world, there's a bike called the Airdyne. There's
Yeah.
a bike that your arms move with the bike. I always found that as a great way. Why? It's pretty hard to get hurt on an Airdyne. You run too hard, you fall, you get hurt. You ride a bike too fast and you fall over and you get hurt. But the Airdyne, it's safe. You can keep it in your garage. But yeah, of course, under medical supervision, obviously. Don't exercise unless your doctor says you can. Have to get that out there. So, Mark, based upon your experience, Todd, working with athletes, what benefits have you observed when they incorporate yoga into their strength training routines? Any negatives you observed as well?
Excellent question. Thank you very much. So the feedback I receive from most, and let me just pick pro golfers. So because they're doing, say, one-sided swing, they're always swinging the same way. So they're developing their bodies in a way that is one-sided. And so one of the main things I noticed that they say is they feel the benefit from yoga is that because yoga is very balanced, everything we do on the right, we're going to do on the left. Every time we go forward, we're going to go backward. If we twist to the right, we're going to twist to the left. So some of the feedback I receive from professional athletes is that it is a great balancing technique in terms of developing the coordination from right, left, top, up, down, front, back. The other main benefit is just an overall improvement of mobility, which actually leads to more power. Say like the power of a swing. If there's more mobility and range of motion and the ability to actually take a full backswing and have enough rotational ability to generate as much momentum as possible, that they feel that. The other main benefit I hear them say is just mostly the head game. Because professional athletes, and I get to speak with different professional athlete coaches that work with the head game element. And often when we see these pros, we think like they don't have any problems in their life. And that's not true. Actually, they have just as many problems as we do, if not maybe even more. And so to be able to get their head in the game and have different techniques that they learn in yoga practice, to bring onto the sporting field with them, or the sport wherever they do their sport. That's one of the other big benefits I noticed. Now, in terms of, have I heard of people say negatives? The only negative I might have come across or critique is that if somebody needs very dense musculature and they need to be tight for the sport they do, that, like, I guess I had somebody who was a tennis player that they said their tennis coach was saying, don't do yoga because I don't want your ankles to get too flexible. I want you to keep your ankles really tight so that when you make quick movements from side to side on the court. And I mean, I guess that's one trainer's perspective. Sometimes I've heard that sort of critique, but I would say 98 to 99% of the time, yoga is a perfect complement to any other professional sport routine.
And coming from the strength and conditioning perspective, I agree with Todd completely. Here's the two danger places with yoga. It's not the yoga itself. It's if you've got an athlete and their strength and conditioning program is really rough, and they're pushing it to the limit where they don't have any additional ability to exercise, and then they add yoga on top of it, it can lead to overtraining syndrome. Now, obviously, the solution to that is to back off on some of the other training 10% and add yoga, and then they don't have the problem. So as long as the person's not overtraining, it's great. Now, there's one other place where I see it there. So when we're dealing with an athlete, what we're looking for is a very flexible big toe, which yoga is going to help, a very stable foot, which yoga is going to help. We're looking for a very flexible mobile ankle, a very stable knee, a very mobile hip, a stable low back, a mobile thoracic spine, and a stable neck. Now, there are certain yoga poses that could put too much mobility in the lower back for certain power athletes. Now, as a rule, if you got a guy or a girl that's pretty muscled up, it's pretty hard to overly mobilize them. But if you're dealing with a power lifter that's going to be deadlifting 800, 900, 1,000 pounds as their sport, and we loosen up their low back a little too much, then it can make them predisposed for injuries picking up that 900-pound barbell off the ground. But how many people are picking up 900-pound barbells off the ground? Not many. And most of those people could use a little yoga in their life. So it's just the overtraining we have to worry about.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. I mean, one of the things that I feel thankful for because I've been practicing yoga for so long, I've actually had to change my yoga practice because I just, for example, back bends, I had a very flexible back bend and could do very extreme back bending positions. But then I started to suffer some problems because of that. And I've had to retrain a little differently. And now I just do very gentle back bending because ultimately at the end of the day, we want to feel better.
Yep.
And so it's easy in all of our endeavors to just get so extreme because we think extreme equals better. But I really, believe that if we come from a place of intelligence and we have the ability to observe and we honor our intuition and or we can feel and we honor what's happening in the moment, that it's possible to tune our practices so that they're like just so optimized.
Okay, now we're going to try and be a little quicker on the questions, and we have to wrap up in a few minutes. But we're going to get quicker on the questions since they always pop in right before we're ready to leave.
Yeah. Well, thank you we do appreciate the questions. Thank you so much.
So we're going to be quick on this one. Can you all speak about the benefits of heat stress and how to practice it? Well, Ruben, heat stress is highly controversial. Heat stress under the right circumstances can be great. Under the wrong circumstances can actually be deadly. Now, personally, I practice yoga in a 130-degree room. But for me, I'm used to it. I train under the heat. And to put it in the context, I consume well over 1 gallon of water during that 60-minute practice in that 130-degree room. And I weigh myself before and after. And for every pound you lose, you need an additional 16 ounces of fluid to drink. And even drinking a gallon during that 1-hour yoga session, I typically lose 5 to 10 additional pounds that have to be made up for later in the day. But that's me. So there is a benefit in terms of detoxification, theoretically, with being in the heat. When you're in the heat, your body doesn't hurt so bad. When you're in the heat, your blood vessels dilate. When you're in the heat, you are more flexible and mobile, which can get you there a lot faster and a lot further. So there are benefits, but heat stress is one of those things you really need to have a conversation with your physician first.
Yeah, and I'll play devil's advocate with you, Mike, because I've done a lot of heat training, and it also acts as a little bit of an analgesic, which is a little bit of a challenge because then all of a sudden you're in this really hot room, you had a little bit of back pain, you think, wow, I feel so great all of a sudden, let me just push really deep into this position. And then you come out of the hot room, you get back into room temp situation, and your body it's almost like we can go too far because of this like analgesic effect that it has. So I know I keep going back to this moderation idea, but I like a warm environment, not too hot. Mike, I know you love it cranking hot. It works really good for what you have going with your health and your body. And so, yeah, I think your answer, Mike, was spot on because it is person by person independent. I used to be like when somebody would come to a hot yoga class because I was teaching hot yoga and they'd say, oh, I can't handle the heat. I thought, oh, you just got to toughen up. But now, no, it doesn't work great for everybody. Some people have some situations where they don't need to be going into that really hot room. Yeah. So it is a very person by person specific situation. And then naturally, if somebody's pregnant, no, I wouldn't recommend going into that ultra hot environment, especially if you're new to these sort of practices.
Good points.
Yeah, protect the little ones.
Thanks, Todd and Mike. You feel like the class section of the experience we had at the conference, which you taught, Todd,
That's right.
We really enjoyed it.
Thank you,
And
Valerie.
yes, we are bringing some of that here, Valerie. Good perception. Merging the experience of yoga and knowledge, I feel like group yoga is more than doing it on your own. Any comments? Valerie, that's why most people go to yoga classes. And Todd also has an online yoga component where you can be in Canada, Manitoba, I think is where you're at, and still practice, Todd.
Yeah.
Todd, if you can pop in the chat box a link for like a 2 or a 4 week sign up, if you have something like
Sure.
that available, to give people free yoga for a couple weeks to get to explore it, because your yoga is the best.
Absolutely.
So the answer is yes, Valerie. You are 100% right. I drive 50 miles to Todd's class anytime that I have the ability and my back cooperates for the drive. But I don't usually have the time. So if I've got 5 minutes where I've got a set hour that corresponds with Todd, I send Todd a message and say, please send me the Zoom link to your class. The rest of the time I practice with my cat, Cindy. And she's my yoga audience, and then I don't feel like I'm practicing alone. Good point.
Thanks for mentioning that. Yes, I'll put the link right now.
And pop a link to your YouTube channel too, in case anybody wants to learn more.
Cool. All right, I just put that one link. That's how people can actually do the live stream, and then I'll keep talking with you, Mike, while I do this, so I don't distract you.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll go to the next one, and I want to actually get into Emperor Kiro's one, and I'm going to take it a little differently than the way we would typically talk about it today. So Emperor Kiro, hi, do you know any techniques you can perform possibly situations so lately your stress management isn't bad and it's been leading your mind to self-sabotage? So yes, Emperor Kiro. First, throughout the day, we did some Ujjayi breathing techniques, for example. We did some box breathing techniques. We did several, and they can be beneficial. But I'm going to put on my medical professional hat real quickly. So many of us actually have incorrect thoughts. And those incorrect thoughts cause us a level of negativity, anxiety, and depression. And if it's severe, you should see a medical professional to help you with it. But let's say it's not severe. There's a type of behavioral therapy and psychotherapy called cognitive behavior therapy. Many professional athletes are taught forms of cognitive behavior therapy. Navy SEALs are taught forms of cognitive behavior therapy. Pro athletes are taught forms of cognitive behavior therapy. And Emperor Kiro, there's a really good book. It's an old book. In my medical office, I used to buy copies of 100 and give them out to anybody that had a degree of anxiety and depression. It's called Feeling Good, and it's written by a physician named David Burns. And what happens is all people have some thinking errors. For example, here's the thinking error. Like, let's say you had a test and you scored a 99 out of 100 on an exam. That's huge. You did great, right? But some people make a thinking error called ignoring the positive, and they blame themselves and they get depressed for that 1% that is off. And another one is called all or nothing thinking. You got a job offer for a job you desired, but you wanted $210,000, but they only offered you $190,000. And you get angry and you don't want to take it because it's all or nothing, and that's a thinking error. Another one is predicting the future. So there's a lot of thinking errors that we've all made, and all of us make them. And by being able to take the thought that you see, catching it, and then redirecting it to something else, you'll do well. I actually teach cognitive behavior therapy and these techniques in our Cloud Architect programs because it makes people better architects. But what I can tell you is look into either David Burns' book, Feeling Good. There's another physician that talked about automatic negative thoughts. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. Daniel Eyman is another physician who even made it much simpler. But those kind of things can be very useful to look at your thinking, redirect your thinking, and take you back to a positive place.
Well done, Mike.
And then we'll get to Ernest. And then Todd and I will both have an aspect here, and then we'll end right after this. The only negatives you've got are people willing to do it. Athletes would rather lift or play their sport than yoga. So selling it to them. So I'll take my perspective first. Ernest, I've had lots of athletes, and I've never had one of them tell me no, they weren't willing to do yoga. But here's the thing, as an athlete, you're typically dealing with someone that'll do anything for 2 or 3% performance gains. Whether that be steroids, whether that be growth hormone, they're willing to do anything. So if you sell it to them properly, and you give them statistics about the percentage of yoga that's there. In fact, probably the best strength and conditioning facility in the United States is a company called Exos. Mark Vergeston is the CEO, or at least he used to be. All professional strength and conditioning coaches get some training there at some point. Anybody in the NFL has probably been there. Anybody in the NBA has probably been there. They're the most successful. And prior to moving, they do something called movement prep, and which is basically active stretches. And then they do some pillar prep, which usually has some yoga poses inside there. And then in the end of the training, there's some stretches. And some of those stretches actually come out of yoga. In fact, they often, in between sets of exercises, do stretches as well. So if you're not able to sell it, go dig up the data, show the percentages of professional athletes that are doing it. Look at the professional football players, look at the professional rugby players, look at the basketball players. And look at the football Americano people as well as the football, soccer game people that are out there. I bet you're going to see a lot of them and use that data to sell it to your clients. But that's the way I would do it. And then show those clients the measurable results. I'll let you address this, Todd, and then we'll close it out.
No, I think you did a great job there, Mike. You're good point. I guess the way I'd answer that is that the way my wife and I have marketed or encouraged yoga is just by living it and loving it and just keep doing it and just talk to people. And so that I feel like example is number one. So usually people want to do something if they see results from others. So, demonstrating the results and showing that other people are benefiting. And that usually is really great proof.
Okay, so I think we'll end on that. And I'll remind everybody, we've got a 35% off sale on all of our programs right now. I also want to hope that you guys learn something about how to control your mind. Control your mind, control your life, control your body, control your life, control your mind, enhance your career. So realistically speaking, take charge.
Yeah.
Either you let the world come and take everything it wants for you, or what you actually do is you take charge and you say, this is my life and I want to win. And then you find the best training, the best coaches, and you get to any goal that you want. Nothing stops you, any of you. Todd is part of my coaching team. I've got a couple of coaches because even the coaches have to get better every day. And I can tell you that Native Yoga, that studio, if you're in Florida, or even Native Yoga Online, has changed my life in very positive ways. Todd, thank you for all you've done for me over the years.
Thank you,
in terms of physical rehab for my foot and back injuries and shoulder injuries. Thank you for bringing me into yoga when I was sentenced to yoga and making it a part of my life. And I'm always glad and every time you're willing to share your expertise with our community. So thank you, Todd.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
And we'll see you all tomorrow. Okay, so if you want to get a cloud architect job, we've got a free guide for you to download, and we're going to have a free webinar on Thursday. I hope to see so many of you there. Take care, everyone.